Well, thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Stephen Pernick, and I'm running for United States Congress. And thank you to Brian for hosting, and also to the East Pasco Democratic Club. Before I begin, I would like to just start with something that I think is really, really important. There's something going on right now. There's a battle for the soul of our nation. And we are in a situation where we are essentially asked to become numb through this process because of the constant barrage of attacks on the most vulnerable among us. And top of that list, for me, is children who are separated from their families at the border. Now, I'm not going to let this issue go, and I'm asking each of you to join me in never forgetting those kids. As you may know, in some cases, in many cases, the link between them and their parents has been lost. And every day that goes by, more damage is being done to their little minds because they are scared, they are alone, and they're struggling in a foreign land. And they're completely innocent. And so I'm raging against that. And I ask you to join me in bringing it up with people that we meet on the street, with our friends, with our family members. If we get to a point where it no longer bothers us, we will have lost a big piece of who we are. And so this is not just a question about who we are as a nation, it's a question about who we choose to be going forward. Now, I started this process really in 2015 when a certain candidate came down in a fancy tower and announced that Mexicans are rapists and murderers and drug dealers. And some of them, some, may be good people. And it almost pushed me back in my seat. I was so astounded because that was a line that was crossed that I had never seen get crossed before in my lifetime. And I thought to myself, how can we uncross that line? Why wouldn't it be that going forward, every election where you have a close election, one of them wouldn't just pull out the scapegoating card to divide us, to target the most vulnerable, to blame them for our struggles, to be the hero and the one that would defend them from these, interlopers, which of course you know I don't feel about. So, I knew at that moment I was going to do something serious. Now, as some of you may know, I have never done this before. I've never been a politician. And I had a successful career in the world of tax. I graduated Tarpon High, studied business at the University of Notre Dame, and after working as an auditor for the government, I eventually started my own tax consultancy in 2007, and we had a lot of success. And this was never part of the plan. I tell people, I don't want to do this. I feel I have to do this because so much is at stake. And I'm doing this for my community. I'm doing this for my nation. And I'm doing this for my children and my grandchildren. Because it is a path that is unsustainable. How does this end well when we target one of our own? Whole groups of people. People I went to school with in Tarpon, about 3 weeks ago now, wrote on Facebook that it's time for civil war to kill liberals. I'm not making this up. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, they're blaming us for the hollowing out of the middle class. I thought to myself, that's incredible. What about trickle down? I mean, clearly we're protecting the 1% whom have really inherited the earth. And they're blaming us who would stand against them? And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, this reminds me of something in our history. Now, I want to make a quick analogy. By the way, Brian, how long do I have? 20 minutes. Thank you.
Oh, you mean how much longer do you have?
That's how I interpreted your answer. Oh, okay.
Well, from one politician to another who likes to talk like I do, then we'll give you another 14 minutes. All right.
You're doing fine.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So, when it comes to creating fire, it takes three things, right? It takes fuel, oxygen, and a spark. You need something to burn, an environment in which things can burn, and someone who's willing to light the fuse. Okay? We saw that in Europe in the 30s and early 40s, right? Yep. After World War I, we had punished the German people. And then the Depression hit. And the Jewish people had been involved in the baking industry. And after the sanctions and the Depression, the middle class had been hollowed out in Germany. And the country was vulnerable. And all it took, with that environment and the fuel or people to burn, all it took was someone to light it on fire. Do we see the parallels between what happened then and what we have today? For 40 years, we have not protected the middle class. We have destroyed our unions. The minimum wage is a joke. Did you know that if minimum wage had kept up with increases in productivity just in the last 10 years, we would have a $21 minimum wage right now? Our infrastructure is falling apart, but we have $22 trillion in debt. How do you have a falling apart infrastructure and all this debt? I mean, either show me this first-class rail system or show me the debt, but don't show me that you have the worst of both of those outcomes. How did that happen? All of these things I present to you comes back to corruption, greed, and power. Every single one of these. The $22 trillion was spent, that didn't go to you or me. That was to keep them in power. So we have to look at our situation and be honest with ourselves. This could lead to serious violence. And so my job in speaking to you today, and if I were to be honored to be your representative, would be to change the environment in which things can burn. Things or people can burn. The environment. And that comes back to the two pillars of my platform. Fighting income inequality, or restoring middle-class wealth, and fighting corruption and dysfunction in government. And I would present to you that those two pillars are actually connected. That if we can oppose tyranny, oppose corruption, we will be able to protect and rebuild the middle class. And this is how we will win as a party. So we can have a seat at the table. So we can make the social change that we believe in. Let's take care of rebuilding the middle class first. So, how are we going to do that? Well, I don't want to get into a lot of details. There are a lot of things I've written on my website and on our palm cards. But one thing I'd like to highlight, I guess I'll give you two. First of all, I want to bring back the public works, the WPA and the CCC. You know what? Let's have a round of applause for them. Why are we not talking about this? I'm a new Democrat and I'm all over it. I love it. Okay? The idea is that we can invest in our people. And we say as a government, this is our responsibility to create a budding middle class. We have a 20% of Americans have dropped out of the workforce. Forget about the unemployment rate. That's not real. Because they're either overqualified or underqualified, or their skills don't match the quickly evolving economy. Or, in some cases, quite honestly, wages are so depressed, it's not worth their time. So we can solve that problem and rebuild our infrastructure by bringing back the New Deal. And I believe this can happen because I experienced this firsthand in my own business. When I started Altus Consulting in 2007, the majority of my first employees were people who were out of work and not trained in tax. But I believed in them, and I invested in them. And they became incredibly successful. We retrained them, and our business thrived. So I know it can be done because I experienced it firsthand. This is a major cornerstone for how we will rebuild our country in many, many ways. Now, the second thing I want to highlight is campaign finance reform. Well, come on, let's clap. Look, I don't get it, okay? Again, very few of us are talking about it. When I sat down with the editorial board of the Tampa Bay Times, I was the last candidate in my race to sit down with them. And they said, you're the only one that brought it up. And I thought, how can that be? How can that be? Because campaign finances are the lifeblood of our democracy. And until we fix that, okay, we will never succeed in passing good law, in passing law that protects the middle class and rebuilds our country and prevents us from being vulnerable to a demagogue who would divide us. So I believe we need to overturn Citizens United or, because that won't be easy. We can limit how much can be spent. So much of the conversation has been focused on how much you can raise during an election, but not how much you can spend. And it would be a way to sort of circumvent their argument, which has really made our voices unheard, right? Because when the wealthiest can spend millions and billions of dollars, or in some cases, people coming in from overseas or large corporations funneling into super PACs, do you really think your $10 or $50 or even $1,000 donation to a campaign is going to matter? No, it won't.
But it helps. It helps.
Great point, Michael. Thank you. And that brings me, this is a grassroots campaign. Now,
you also need to limit the number of days and weeks that you can actually campaign.
I love that idea. That is a great
That's what they do in Europe.
Everybody's got
You have so much money, so much money.
only so much television advertising, only so much radio, only so much of this, and everybody's got the same amount. Now, when you level that field off, then your billionaires don't have their billions.
I love that idea, and I actually would also support.
Because it's a common sense idea.
Yeah, you're probably right. And also public financing of elections.
Well, we tried that. Remember, on your income tax, you had a little thing that said I contribute $1 to the presidential campaign. Well, that should have been all that you could contribute to a presidential check, but that didn't happen.
Yeah. So, quick quiz here for you all. Does anybody have any idea how much Jimmy Carter had to spend in 1976 to win the Democratic primary?
Probably less than you have to spend on
Right
it.
now.
That's a great answer. That's a great answer.
$2 million.
$90,000. Now that's probably worth about $350,000 today, but still, that's the President of the United States, right? And we know that $40 billion was spent in the last presidential election when you include all of the PACs and super PACs and things like that. $40 billion. How many schools could we build with $40 billion?
Oh my God.
How many roads? How many people could be retrained or helped with addiction?
Oops, sorry. Okay,
before I close, I just want to share a personal story. It comes down to sort of a difficulty or really a blessing we have here in terms of our election. And I'm talking about the governor's race. Now, just out of curiosity, can I see a show of hands of everybody in this room that has already voted? Wow, that is so wonderful. My God. Thank you. Thank you for voting. For the one person in the back, I still want to talk to you. How about your son? I think I can sway him. But I actually just filled out my ballot about 3 days ago, and I was really struggling with the governor's race because we have a good problem right now, right? We have a lot of great candidates in the governor's race, and before I go any further, let me just say I respect, of course, whoever you all selected. I don't mean to cast judgment upon that, but this is my own story in this process. And so there's no right or wrong answer. But I was looking at the choices, and I'm thinking to myself, I want him to win or her to win in the general election, and this one guy's so progressive, but gosh, I love him. Can he win? And I was about to fill in a bubble for someone that either had, name recognition or a ton of money, and I thought, you know what? If I do that, does my vote even really count? Because I'm just voting for the person that we're supposed to be voting for, and not the person who I really love and want to win. And then I thought to myself, if I vote for this person that may or may not be able to get through, I thought to myself, you know what? He or she will have the energy behind them if they break through the primary. Because we believe in their ideas. And we know they have a heart for the people. And it would be sort of like what, the few people that we see now and then that come forward to run that are true statesmen, that really are worth supporting, and we're willing to sacrifice to get them there. And so I voted for Andrew Gillum. I really think that our progressive values, we explain them right. And we connect them with the kitchen table issues. We can show Americans, Floridians, and people in our district that unbridled capitalism is unsustainable. And the Democratic Party has the vision for rebuilding our country. Again, my name is Stephen Perry, and I'm running for Congress.
His mailing address for a check.
So if you'd like that.
Yes, I like that.
I won't take your brochure. I just want to.
Hi. Early in your presentation to us, you made a statement that was rather disturbing. And the more I thought about it, it was really thought-provoking. And as I thought about it, I came up with an answer for you. And you're the only candidate who could actually answer this and do this, because I've heard you many times speak, I've spoken to you, you have a platform that addresses this, and you have a passion to address this. You mentioned that someone posted up that it was time for a civil war. Well, if you look at it in one way, I see how you were disturbed, but I think you could answer that, and I think you could agree that it is time for a civil war. A war on hate, a war on division, a war on prejudice, a war on alternative facts. And you're the only candidate, I think, that could do that and carry it on, because I think that goes along with your platform.
Well, thank you. It was really nice of you to say that. I like, of course, as a school teacher, right, you could see the change of words, civil, right? That makes a ton of sense. I'm not sure that it would, I wonder if it would be lost on them. Thank you for that. Any other questions? Alan?
You're a tax professional.
Yes.
And I've studied this issue quite a bit. Now, I think Trump's tax programs have obviously short-term benefits, which is making him look good. But I believe that it's going to explode and smash him in the face soon. What is your view on that?
Well, I agree. So did everybody hear his question?
Yes.
Yep. So I believe, first of all, that the way the tax code was recently revised, it's designed actually to increase short-term profits and really push more money to the top 1%.
Oh, yeah.
And what it's not going to do is make us more competitive on the world stage. Now, we all know there are three major ways that you can incite or grow an economy. Okay? We can lower taxes, we can increase spending, and we can lower interest rates. Those are the three major things that governments can do. The problem is, and if you think about it, and as you go forward, listen to the way they speak. The conversation is framed around growth, but it's not framed around healthy growth.
Right.
It's framed around more of like a caffeine shot in the arm type growth that leaves you feeling down after the caffeine wears out. And that's where we're headed, Alan. It's going to hurt us in the long term. Companies are not going to reinvest in R&D because they know that every dollar of profit can go towards executive compensation or shareholders to get their stock prices up. We need to increase the corporate rate. Now, how do we do that without hurting our economy? Well, the answer is incrementalism. Incrementalism. We do it a little bit. We pass a law that is a 10-year plan, which we rarely think in terms of down the road, and it has a small tick up every year. And what that will allow us to do is make adjustments and not be sort of shocked by the changes in our monetary state. So that's just one of my solutions for the tax issue, but I am very concerned about where we will be, especially not only in terms of investment, but also debt at the end of this 10 years. Mike.
In a lot of our schools, because you talked about education, in a lot of our schools we see generational poverty. Especially in Title I schools, the socioeconomic condition is the new segregation tool. It's no longer about black and white, it's about green.
Yep.
And that's literally what determines whether a child's going to be successful in some cases. The education no longer the equalizer, if you will. What would your stance be on expanding, just like we did for Americans with disabilities, to be included in that whole protected realm in the federal level?
I really like that idea. I've never heard of that idea, but it sounds like a great idea. I think you're right. We need to get aggressive about arresting systemic poverty. I think there are other things we can do as well. I would like to see a federal program that provides greater funding for underperforming states in education so that we can have more teachers in those states and higher paid teachers in those states. And it's interesting because Florida would be a beneficiary of that policy.
Right away they would be.
I read an article.
Oh, I'm sorry, I think there was somebody else back there. Yes.
My son doesn't want me to talk, but I'm going to say something. I hope I don't embarrass him. I have a crazy idea. You know, we have a minimum wage. Why can't there be a maximum wage? It's crazy, but hear me out.
I don't think it's crazy.
The only way to return the middle class, to return them back to where they were before, is we have to take more from the upper 10 and upper 1%. Now, how do we do that? How do we do that and return the money back to the middle class the way it should have been? Right now it's shrinking, we want it to grow, and you can't do it all at once. But you have to find a way to do it and return this. And your idea of a New Deal, I think that's excellent. You got to put people back to work. And with the last 8 years of Obama, he was blockaded from getting anything done.
Right.
Because I believe, because he was black, which wasn't fair.
Right.
Now we have another person in office who will not get anything done unless he wants to get it done for his own purposes. But somehow we have to return that money to the middle class, like we did before. I don't know how we can do it.
Strengthen unions.
Straight to yep. But the wealthiest of the wealthiest, how many cars do they need? How many houses? How many planes can one person have?
Right.
How much stuff does people need to have? Enough is enough. They don't need any more money.
I love your point, and I think it's right on. Did you know, so I've done a lot of work for the big automobile companies, and it's interesting because I've had a chance to work for several, both domestic and foreign, and the foreign automobile manufacturers have a culture that limits executive compensation.
Right.
Give you a couple examples, and this is going back, because I don't have current statistics, but the CEO of BMW makes about $4 million a year. The CEO of Ford makes about $25 million a year. Wow. Okay? The CEO of Toyota made between $600,000 and $800,000 a year. Toyota. And the idea is that it's more of an egalitarian culture. They don't have this idea that it's win at all costs and survival of the fittest run amok. I had an opportunity to do some work for Honda, and it's interesting, the plant manager sits in this huge room along with everyone else that is, in the office, the administration people, and they could be officers. And the only difference between the top guy of the plant and everybody else was that he had a desk that was in the corner facing everybody, and everybody else was in a cube. But the idea is that we knew when he was on the phone. We knew when he was there, and everything was out in the open. And it was the idea that I'm one of you, right? We're in this together, right? And that's really the truth of the matter. That's part of why I'm running for Congress, because we are being told that we need to divide. And it's just the opposite is true.
Excuse me.
Who's next?
I just
I just want to comment. I read a newspaper article the other day that said that the wages, contrary to what they told us when they passed that big tax bill,
Right.
have not increased. Mm-hmm. And I knew it was they weren't going to, because some people gave bonuses last year. Doesn't add anything to your down the road.
Right.
And so, that, I don't know, that needs to be worked on.
Yeah.
The tax bill needs to be worked on.
Yeah, great point. Thank you for that. Yes.
I just want to comment on the maximum minimum wage, only because to save some grace for this man, because it is a great idea.
Yes.
And by setting a ceiling where we want to call people on our democratic values to move that way, there's a lot of ways to shame companies, shame communities, shame cultures into moving away from a minimum wage of less than $20,000 a year for families. And it's less controversial than litigating a continual minimum wage. Not that we take that away, but I think we need to start legislating some values of where we want to be. And then judge people publicly by whether they get there or not. And there's plenty of people that we used to do that in the New Deal. Companies were judged according to how many new jobs. Full employment was not such a rare thing. It is now, but it wasn't then. So I mean, I'm just saying maybe that's not such a bad idea to set a maximum salary rate that we want certain people to have, so not everybody can go to college.
Thank you for that. Great point.
Megan raised her hand earlier, and we have you, sir, and that will wrap up the question and answer.
So you spoke about the bringing back the WPA. You've spoken about bringing educators to poorer performing schools. My question is, how do you want to expand AmeriCorps, and how do you want to expand Teach for America in order to do both? Because you have AmeriCorps, which basically is the little baby brother of WPA, working in nonprofits and building careers for people. I went through AmeriCorps 2 years, and you have Teach for Teach for America, which I believe falls under the same National Civic. I forget the whole NCCC. So how are you going to build and expand and grow those, and where are you going to find the money?
Good luck, because both of those companies are now under scrutiny for having screwed the people they were supposed to be working for.
Wow.
I believe that's the latest edition. I think you can find that in some of the magazines.
All I know is I got my undergrad paid off through AmeriCorps.
Well, I understand that. And at first, it was working, but then they ran them up.
Okay.
So one of my ideas was to expand the GI Bill. And the idea would be that we would increase the number and types of public service jobs, public sector jobs, that could be worked in order to get your college education paid for. I could see that idea coming in under AmeriCorps. But I think you raised two other issues that are really important. One is the money, right? And the second is the idea of expanding bureaucracy in some cases, right? And that's why I'm really focused on corruption, because unfortunately we give into the narrative that the other side continues to hold over us when there's corruption in government. So I really want to increase transparency in government. And I think we need to stop thinking in terms of our public servants as, well,